So again, good old mundane things. I decided to get a floor screen so that when I shoot things for the Osteopathic Lyceum podcast, I have a slightly more interesting background, but it also doesn't take up much space because I can put the damn thing away. The thing that I'm going to have to be careful with is because it is light, it is a floor screen, a room divider, and it's primarily paper on the inside, or sort of, it's paper. Where's my finger? Why won't it show up? It's paper here. When I take it out of the box, it'll be too easy to break, so I won't have this up when the students are in. I'll use it for filming purposes. So one of the really nice things about it is if you have, say, something you can focus on right in front, now it's not going to work. It'd be better if I was in front. But then what ends up happening is the symmetrical pattern behind will essentially blur, so you get something nice. And then we can play around with the lights in different ways. So if I do this, I can hopefully turn that on. So now, through that white screen, we get some interesting effects. And if I mess around and bring this light closer in an interesting way, it should change how that generally looks. All right. So now we have, say, a softer light with multiple colors, so some interesting things happening. I might have to move that blue light back a little bit further to get some more interesting stuff out of it. But we get this interesting kind of light play as a background. So as a simple test, this should actually end up looking somewhat interesting. So it's definitely focusing on my face. When I put this on a bigger screen for myself, I'll see what it looks like. But it gives me the opportunity to play around with sort of different light settings and have something that can be blurred. I might have to move up a little bit. We'll see what happens. And maybe even change the color. Who knows if it'll work. Will it work? It doesn't want to work. Yeah, so we can do stuff like that. That's way too red. That's not going to work. Let's see what happens if we go to good old blue. It makes it way too purple. Let's try... Green was doing good. Let's try green again. Yeah, that softens it up a little bit better. It makes it a little bit more interesting. So we can play around with lights and see what the heck happens. But yeah, it gives us an interesting setting and contrast and whatnot. So we'll play around with this more, hopefully over time in an iterative fashion. Iterative being starting from the new point of learning. So you learn something and then you start from that new point. Help the whole project look a little bit nicer over time in fairly simple ways. So I was poking around some research for a student, and really with a student, who's doing something about prone oscillation and claims of prone oscillation doing something to the sympathetic nervous system or the autonomic nervous system such that you would predict that you would see some change in heart rate and blood pressure. So this is a paper I came across. And what I want to do is use this not necessarily to be negative, but to show just how challenging it can be to appropriately cite something or write in a way that cites and doesn't mess up important stuff. So we'll scroll down. So the thing that I'm going to focus on, I'm going to highlight. It's this specific paragraph because, like I said, we're looking for stuff that talks about the ability of prone oscillation to do something, or really repetition and kind of rhythmic movement. Now, it's not specifically speaking about prone oscillation, but if we scroll up, so I'll just show you this. Where the heck is prone oscillation? It is number 11 here. So it's part of the general osteopathic treatment or the body adjustment from the Institute of Classical Osteopathy. So anyways, scroll back down and I'll read this. So I'll read this and then I'll pop over to the papers as we go. So I'll read. The goals of the GOT are mainly to identify potential somatic dysfunctions, to gain range of motion, direct technique, and to soften the tissues. Indeed, repetitive passive movements are known to improve range of motion and to promote motor function in patients by modulation cortical spinal processes. I didn't actually notice that was poorly typed. Motor function in patients by modulation cortical spinal processes. I would assume that an of would be fun in there. Anyways, so the paper that we're citing from is Cortical Excitability following passive movement, right? That's the paper they cited. That was number 33 in their citation list in the other paper. So we scroll down. It's talking about cortical excitability, so they're correct. Repetitive motions impact cortical excitability, but what they don't seem to do the best job of saying, as we scroll down here, is that these repetitive passive movements are primarily done by machines, and it's finger movements. So there are varying frequencies to do this, but there is a consistent, stable frequency that they've messed around with to find the best one. It doesn't mean that repetitive movements such as prone oscillation or anything rhythmic within a general treatment that you'd find from the Institute of Classical Osteopathy doesn't impact cortical excitability. It means that they didn't note that for the ability to kind of pop this over into osteopathy, that the research they're citing was done by a machine, not a practitioner. So now we pop back over to the original paper and we read again, just kind of trying to run through this. So we go from 33. Moreover, passive rhythmic mobilization procedures possibly stimulate the intrafascial mechanoreceptors of tissues involved, leading to altered proprioceptive input to the central nervous system and therefore tonus regulation of motor units associated with these tissues. So jump into the paper that was 34, and I'm just going to do a Control F to look for tonus. All right, tonus, and we get 37 hits. All right, so we go down here. What do we got here? Stimulation of the sensory receptors has been shown to lead to a lowering of sympathetic tonus as well as a change in local tissue viscosity. Where do we get? Many approaches to manual therapy focus their treatment on the fascia. They claim to alter either the density, tonus, viscosity, or let's actually roll up and see what the heck they're talking about here. Arrangement of fascia through application of manual pressure. Their theoretical explanations usually refer to the ability of fascia to adapt to physical stress. How the practitioner understands the nature of this particular responsiveness of fascia will, of course, influence the treatment. Unfortunately, fascia is often referred to in terms of its mechanical properties alone. This series of articles will not only explore its neural dynamics behind fascial plasticity, but also offer new perspectives for myofascial methods. So one of the things in this paper, let's see if we can kind of jump around here. Alpha motor neurons translates to a tonus decrease in related tissues. Did they cite that? Nope, no citing. Yeah, so this claim doesn't have a citation, does it? Cottingham, okay. There we go. Cottingham suggested that during soft tissue manipulation, as well as hatha yoga postures, slow active stretching, blah, blah, blah. This isn't this is not an experiment paper. The best way to put it is to say that this is like a set of review papers looking at what's out there. So if you're going to make the claim, as in the original paper, about the fascial mechanisms, you would want to ideally quote the original research, not the review paper. The review paper points you to the original stuff, and then when you look at the original stuff, you can understand it a little bit better and see if it's got what you want it to have. So that's another challenge. It's not that they're improperly citing what was said in the fascial paper, but the fascial paper isn't where it came from. The fascial paper is pointing to where the original experimentation came from, so we would want to get there. So we'll read again. An impact on heart rate variability in the sympathovagal balance could possibly also be induced by the GOT, as standard OMT, like balanced ligamentous and membranous techniques, have been shown to influence HRV and the autonomic nervous system activity, increasing parasympathetic activity. So yeah, let's bump over to that paper. It is this guy. Variations of high frequency parameter of heart rate variability following osteopathic manipulative treatment in healthy subjects compared to control group and sham therapy, randomized controlled trial. Once again, big nerdy title. Let's read the abstract here. Let's come out here. Context. Heart rate variability indicates how heart rate changes in response to inner and external stimuli. Maybe I read that funny. HRV is linked to health status and is an indirect marker of autonomic nervous system function. Blah, 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 blah. This is what's important. The method, 66 healthy subjects, both male and female, were included in the present 3-armed randomized placebo control trial. placebo-controlled within subject crossover study, single-blinded study, blah, blah, blah. Participants were asymptomatic adults, average 26.7 years, plus or minus 8.4 years, 50%, 51% male, BMI of 18.5, plus or minus 4.8. That's interesting. This seems like we might have had some college students, because those are some small folk. Both smokers and non-smokers not on medications. And enrollment subjects were randomized in 3 groups, ABC, standardized structural evaluation, followed by a patient need-based osteopathic treatment was performed in the first session of Group A and in the second session of Group B. Standardized evaluation followed by a protocol sham treatment was provided in the second. The important thing here is needs-based. So they did a structural evaluation and then they applied essentially standard approaches to osteopathy, whatever those may or may not be. And then we come back over here. So they did a good job here. Impact of heart rate variability and the sympathovagal balance. The sympathovagal balance thing, if we pop back over here, let's Control F this sucker. Control F, sympathovagal. Nothing. It's not there. There's no sympathovagal in this paper. Is there a You know what? I might be lying. I might be being a jerk, because I only got the abstract, so I might be being a jerk. HRV, you can say that's the autonomic nervous system playing a part. So if you wanted to get fancy in your writing, you can say sympathovagal. So I might be being a jerk about this. It's possible. Maybe I'm not. I don't know, because I don't have the full paper. But anyways, because it's a needs-based thing and they weren't using a GOT, they're attempting to say, and they do a decent job of saying, that it could be possibly also be induced by the GOT, the impact on HRV. Like maybe it'll happen there too. So they're making a guess. One of the challenges with a guess like that is you might be overfitting. So it's the same thing with the, what the heck was that again? The cortical excitability. It's a very, very consistent machine doing the cortical excitability stuff with repetitive motion. With the HRV stuff, it is very specifically a structural evaluation followed by standard osteopathic treatment. GOT is very, very standard in how it's applied. With respect to the movements, the amount of time some things are done can vary. The rate at which they're done can vary. There's a lot of variability in there that is definitely going to be related to how the practitioner reads the circumstance. Good, bad, or indifferent. But what this lets me come to with respect to the student who was doing research about prone oscillation, which is something that, again, we pop up here, good old number 11. Yeah, that's not doing a damn thing. Yeah, number 11, prone oscillation's in there. They did prone oscillation with the prediction that heart rate and blood pressure should decrease because of the good old sympathovagal balance, or the autonomic nervous system, or the sympathetic going down and parasympathetic going up, however the heck you want to say it. But they found so far that the heart rate and blood pressure go all over the place. The standard deviation is like 8 on a bunch of the things, which basically means that it's not a reliable approach to do absolutely anything to heart rate and blood pressure, which basically would mean that it is not reliable for impacting the autonomic nervous system with any form of consistency. So lots of kind of rambling. Obviously, this is more of a vlog, but I want to show you how this pieces together. So I'm not going to sit here and say that they did a horrible job writing this up and citing it, but it's actually hard to cite things properly, especially when you are, like, this whole deal is kind of an idea paper. It's like, you know, sort of traditional osteopathy and general osteopathic treatment. It's like basically trying to pick at things and find ways in which I can use somebody else's experiment to say that my stuff is awesome. But then you see that they use like review papers to make claims. So this is probably more of a motivated article. And I understand why you would do that, because you think your stuff is awesome. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But man, you can do way better than this. And, you know, some of these people, I just think they can do better, right? Because you cited review papers. You didn't cite the actual original experiments. Get to the original experiments and see what the heck they say. Just because you read something somewhere in a review paper doesn't mean it's, even that the review paper did a good job citing and reporting what the original thing said. So, you know, this is another thing that goes into running a school. You actually have to sort of have some skills at being up on information consumption and digestion and assimilation, if you like the fancy osteopathic terms, right? You got to be able to do something with the information and figure out if it's good, bad, or indifferent. But hopefully that helps you see where, again, some of the claims that I make in the Osteopathic Lyceum podcast and that the students are working on with respect to their research, how this all sort of comes together. And maybe this format does a better job of walking you down that line.